The Falcons' 53-man roster is set, but questions linger about the offensive line and the blockbuster Micah Parsons trade that's going to shake up the NFC. We're diving into it all on a Sports Extra edition of Locked On Falcons.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Now, if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 20 years, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast, and I think each and every one of you that goes strong with me is every day, or that means you make this podcast your very first listen each and every day. All you got to do to become an everyday or subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today on Locked On Falcons, we are breaking down the surprises on the Falcons 53-man roster with Maria Martin of 11 Alive. We're analyzing the team's plan at right tackle and discussing how the Micah Parsons trade to Green Bay is going to impact the NFC landscape. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Maria Martin of 11 Alive right now. Back by popular demand, we have none other than 11 Alive's Maria Martin to talk about the Atlanta Falcons roster. I believe the quote was in the text thread, "I'm chomping at the bit to talk about this Falcons roster." So Maria, we had to have you back on. People love you. Okay. And I'm like, whoa, what has Maria got on the Falcons roster? So welcome back to Locked On Falcons, Maria.
Thanks. No, I am so excited. And I just thought I could not miss an opportunity to talk about this initial 53-man roster on any Locked On format. So I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. So Maria, let's get into it. What are you so eager that you had to reach out and say, I want to come on this illustrious podcast to talk about the Falcons 53-man roster? What sort of jumped out to you when you saw this initial 53-man roster?
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry to your best friend, Easton Stick, for not being able to make the cut. That was my first thought. I thought, gosh, Aaron is going to be down bad when he sees that they're only carrying two quarterbacks into the season. So I want to start by apologizing to you first and foremost, Aaron. I know you were high on Easton. You thought he was going to be the backup quarterback potentially. He wasn't even QB3. So the Falcons and you were not aligned in that thinking. No, but in all seriousness, I was a bit surprised that Easton didn't make this roster and that they decided to go with 4 tight ends. I thought that was really surprising. Felipe Franks, shout out to that guy, man. He continues to make NFL rosters. And I feel like at this point, he's one of those guys where his size is just undeniable. And so I think teams, their thinking is, look, you look like you can play football. We're going to figure out a way to make you play football. And so he continues to make NFL rosters. So good on you, Felipe Franks. You're keeping the NFL dream alive. Proud of you for that. It's awesome. But I was honestly genuinely surprised by that. And then, of course, when you talk about undrafted free agents, they're probably the best storyline of any team. These are guys who are going to work extra hard for you, not the guys that got drafted don't work hard. But they come with a different kind of mentality, I've been genuinely overlooked mentality, and that's Nathan Carter. I was really surprised he made this running back room, but that big breakout touchdown that he had in the preseason, I think it was 43 yards. The Falcons didn't see a lot of that. And there are a lot of variables that play into that, right? Backup offensive line. Okay, whatever. You're not seeing the team's best on the other side either. However, you still didn't see runs of that magnitude from this Falcons team. And so it allows you to raise your eyebrows and think, maybe we should look at this guy a little bit differently. He's awesome. We talked to him yesterday. Just such a great dude. And you get that from every UDFA. They just exude gratefulness. And so I was very excited that he made the roster. And then I thought a lot of people had a good point of Chris Blair potentially making this roster. And then when he didn't, that was also surprising. But to me, with David Sills, and I think I mentioned it on your podcast, Aaron, with him getting worked into special teams later in the preseason, that was a clear indicator to me that they were really trying to figure out a place for David Sills, and that kind of solidified his role. And then him not playing that final preseason game, you thought, okay, David's going to be in the mix there. I know that a lot of people were shocked by the 5 defensive linemen. I'm just going through the roster right now. I'm not necessarily as surprised, just because there is somewhat of a depth aspect to, and I'm saying this in air quotes because we don't really know yet. We haven't really seen this defensive line and what they could look like. But with this hockey-like mentality that these Falcons coaches have had, they're going to rotate guys in and out. So that doesn't shock me a whole lot. And then the initial 53, so going back before Jordan Fuller went back onto the roster because he didn't make the initial 53. The 3 safeties really did surprise me, but ultimately with Braylon Trice's injury, then they bring Jordan Fuller back. I think that was probably what it should have been all along. And Braylon Trice, you start to get a little bit concerned about at this point because this is the same song and dance we dealt with in 2024. Ross saying surgery is not off the table is obviously concerning, but those were my big flashes and big surprises. And look, we're going to get 2 rookies starting in the secondary. That is going to be very fun, and they better play with their hair on fire because they have a big test very early week 1 against Tampa.
Yeah, you mentioned Nathan Carter. I don't think anybody had him as the one UDFA that was going to make the roster over some of the more higher profile UDFAs. And so you mentioned those rookies with Billy Bowman and Xavier Watts. Talked about that on yesterday's show with Jarvis Davis as well. Basically our consensus was you kind of need to see a lot of these young players, including from this draft class, as well as some of these second-year guys, when it comes to the defensive line. That's probably a contributing factor to why the Falcons only kept 5 interior D linemen, because 2 of them in Rukaroro and Brandon Dorlus are going to get a ton of work this upcoming season. But in your eyes, how important is it for the Falcons to really find out, particularly with these last 2 draft classes, how many pieces they have that could be core foundational pieces for this defense for years to come?
Yeah, I think it's critical, and they're telling you that by starting those 2 in the secondary. And we knew that was always a possibility. You hear coaches and front office members talk about how high they are on a particular draft class, and it felt like that narrative was a little bit different with this draft class versus last year. Last year felt a little bit more work in progress. This year felt a little bit more, we're expecting you to play and play early. They kept saying significant roles. You're going to see them a lot. They didn't say they're going to start, because you don't really know until you see these guys in training camp and in preseason games if they have starter capabilities. But that was kind of always the plan, is we want to get some starters out of this draft class. And the fact that they're naming 2, potentially more, obviously, because we haven't really talked about the other 2, and James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker. Although I know Jalen Walker, there's a little concern with the injury, but I think he's going to be fine. But for the guys in the secondary, you have to have them contribute. There is no option at this point. I thought DeMarco Hellams maybe made a case for him to be that opposite safety of Jesse Bates. He had a really good camp, and he's come out playing with his hair on fire. But ultimately, Xavier Watts, I think, did edge him out a little bit. I think that was the right move. Just the concern, obviously, is these guys are young. They've never seen NFL play at all. I asked Kanan Ellis, just give them a simple piece of advice. Going into week 1 against Tampa, what would you say? He said, confidence is a crazy drug. And it's true. Walk out there, tell yourself that you've been there before, and I think they're going to be fine. And from the jump, I think Rob was really, really adamant about these were 2 very smart players that could come along very quickly. And that was the expectation for them when they walked into the building. And clearly they've lived up to the expectations of the coaching staff in the front office, because when you get 2 starters out of a draft class, that is money in your pocket. That's fantastic. That's what you want out of your draft class, is to find guys. And remember, these are not first-round picks. So if you're finding later guys in the draft, which, again, we've all talked about, Xavier Watts definitely should have gone higher. He's going to be a steal. I really believe that. But when you're finding that within your draft class, that's such a no-brainer for this team.
Yeah. And we'll see what these rookies do when it comes to this upcoming season. We'll get a lot of opportunities to see what they can do on the football field. But I'm curious to pick your brain, Maria, on the situation on the offensive line. It's been the ongoing topic of conversation over the last week. How do the Falcons replace Caleb McGary now that we know officially this week that he is going to be done for the entire season? I want to pick your brain on sort of the current plan at right tackle, which is Elijah Wilkinson is that first man up. And I'm curious if you think that is the right plan. So we'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside, who want to stop you from paying full price at the pump. Get cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app, which you can download in the App Store or on Google Play right now and start earning cash back at the pump. And when you use the limited time promo code Touchdown, you'll get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. And sometimes people think it's too good to be true, but it's not. I've been using Upside for years. I like the fact that you can transfer that money that you get back directly into your bank account, PayPal, or what I like to do is an e-gift card for Amazon as well as other brands. So don't let this offer drive on by. Make sure you download the free Upside app now and then use that promo code Touchdown, and you'll get a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code Touchdown. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. And with the NFL season being back, there's no better time to get in the stadium to cheer on your team. But, getting tickets can be frustrating, and that's where our sponsor Game Time comes in. They're going to give you back the advantage. It's fast, it's easy, it's backed by the Game Time guarantee, where you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price, and all the fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay, and what you see is what you get when you get those panoramic seat views. And if you take the guesswork out of buying tickets by checking out Game Time, by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and then use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase, that $20 can go a long way in MBS for some of those concessions, including those lemon pepper wings. So again, check out the terms, they apply, and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So before we get into this conversation about the Atlanta Falcons offensive line, we have an important request for you here at Locked On. We want to hear from you, get your feedback, what you like, what you don't like. We're trying to make our favorite podcast better. And all you have to do in order to do so is head on over to lockedonpodcast.com/survey and fill out that survey. Tell us about our advertising, all those things, and you'll enter in to be the chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you for your feedback. But Maria, talking about this Falcons offensive line, the plan is Elijah Wilkinson is the first man up. Now, you missed this on yesterday's Falcons squad show.
I missed it.
When we were talking about all the talk of, Brandon Parker's also in the mix and Jack Nelson's also in the mix, that Raheem Morris said, we were like, sure, Raheem. Yes, we've all seen those guys play, and they definitely are guys that you have every intention to give an opportunity to start games. So we took that part with a grain of salt, but I do think it is legitimate that Elijah Wilkinson is the first man up and probably your best option. You also hear, they thought about Matthew Bergeron. So we've talked about whether or not that was a good strategy on a previous Falcon Squad show a couple of weeks ago. But I'm curious, when you look at this strategy that the Falcons are employing at right tackle, are they making the best out of a bad situation? Do you think this is a good plan? Do you see flaws in the Falcons plan as we sit here looking at this offensive line heading into week one?
I think that they're doing the best they can with what they have, and that is the plan that they're going with. And I think you're right. Raheem Morris saying those things, I don't know that that's really definitively the plan is to, and I'm not saying he's saying something that isn't true. I'm sure that was an idea that was bounced around between the coaches, whether or not you're going to rotate 3 guys for a competition at right tackle. I mean, you have to, when you look at this as one of your core pieces on your offensive line, you already lost your center, obviously, in the free agency, and so you're replacing that piece of it, but obviously Newsel has been there for a while. So when you're talking about an offensive line who's had a ton of continuity, and then all of a sudden 2 pieces on the offensive line are a big question mark, it becomes sort of, I don't want to say panic mode, but at the time it probably felt like that. We haven't had to think about this in quite some time. what the heck are we going to do? The benefit to the Falcons, though, is that a lot of these backup offensive linemen, take Jack Nelson out of the mix, take Michael Jarrell out of the mix because he's new as well. They've kind of been here learning the system. They've been a work in progress, which is very much what I believe Jack Nelson is. I do not think he's ready to jump in there and help at right tackle. We've seen him in the preseason. That doesn't mean I don't think eventually that can happen. I just think that he is entirely too young, and it was very clear throughout training camp and in the preseason that there is a lot of work to do with Jack Nelson. So I think Raw throwing those ideas out is to basically say, we're just looking at all internal options at this point. Again, I don't really think that that's the plan. It is Elijah Wilkinson. I would be shocked if you see anyone else trot out there at right tackle against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Elijah doubled down himself when we talked to him, and he said, yeah, it looks like the plan to me, because he was the guy that, initially went in there as soon as Kaleb got hurt, they threw him in there. He's someone who slid all over the line. We've talked about whether or not that's a good plan or not, but he has experience all throughout the line and experience with this team. So, to me, this is the best option that you have given the nature of the situation. But remember, when Kaleb McGary goes down, coaching staff and front office collectively are immediately thinking worst case scenario. And when Raheem Morris says he's going to miss significant time, to me, initial red flag, he's out for the year. And I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to be pessimistic, but typically that's what Raheem Morris does when a player gets significantly hurt. And it is unfortunate that Storm Norton is going to miss significant time too, because you felt a little bit better about the situation. But at the same time, if you're going to let your right tackle decimation is what we'll call it, because now you're down 2 players, okay? And that is worst case scenario for a team, because you start with a veteran that's been a part of this offensive line that, yes, Kaleb McGary has his fair share of criticism over the years, but let's face it, he is the best option. There is no question about it. And it sucks because he was the healthiest he's been in his career. And then boom, this happens. Just sign that extension, all those things. But if you're talking about a decimation at right tackle, your third best option on the team, it sucks. But at the same time, that can't ruin the entire thing on your offensive line, the entire good thing you have going on this offensive line. And if it does, we're talking about an entirely different scenario with this team. So Elijah Wilkinson's your best option. Look, if there's a couple other players, Brandon Parker, Jack Nelson, that give you some kind of hope, great. I hope that that's true. I hope that you're so deep that you can rotate right tackle in and out. That would be music to every single team in the NFL's ears. I don't know that that's the case, but maybe, I don't know, maybe if you say something enough times, you believe that it's true. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the methodology.
Okay.
It's a great one, try it out, because if you say it enough times, maybe it comes true. But no, seriously, I think it's Elijah Wilkinson's show now, and that is the best option that they had. They add Michael Jarrell for depth. The guy is freaking hysterical. I asked him about, what the vibe, he kept saying, the vibe here is great. The vibe is amazing. I said, okay, well, you've said that like 70 times since we started talking. What is the vibe? And he said, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but it's hilarious. He said, it's like getting a new girlfriend. I was like, okay. He said, it's new. It's exciting. It's like, you got rid of your old girlfriend, you get a new girlfriend. Dude's been in the league for a year. Okay. Like how many new girlfriends are we bringing in? No, but he's funny. I think he adds good depth. He even mentioned Super Bowl in his first media appearance, which he knows what's up. He said, how many Super Bowl appearances do the Falcons have? He thought it was 1. It's 2. And he goes, oh, well, we're going to get another one. So I like the energy, but at the same time, you got to be concerned about right tackle. It's just they're going to do the best with what they have given the timing of the injury.
Okay. Yes. I guess we can manifest Brandon Parker as a quality starter by get over again. But obviously with Wilkinson being the first man, like, what is your confidence level? For me, because I've sort of framed it as you're just kind of trying to tread water at that specific position. And you're just you have to do it for the entire year. And hopefully at some point you get Storm Norton back, particularly in October. Sure. And that is a little, maybe that's treading water with a life preserver as opposed to trying to fight against the current. Sure. But how confident are you that they can tread water with Elijah Wilkinson for the 4 to 6 weeks that they need to?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I really fine is how I would describe it. Do I think he's going to be exemplary? No, but if he is, great. That's awesome. I think that it's going to be serviceable and can get you to a place in October, like you're talking about. If you get Storm Norton back, you're really excited about making a push to the playoffs, and you're really excited about if you can get by with him to that point in the year, then he did his job. And it shouldn't all be on Elijah Wilkinson. It shouldn't all be on the right tackle. I know the nature of the position, and everyone's going to talk about the blind side and whatever. And Raw went through a whole thing about how there's not a true blind side in the NFL. You can make that argument a ton, but it's still a very important position, given how the Falcons run the ball, and then again with a lefty quarterback. So this position in particular gives you a lot of concern when there is a rotation at that position without the season having started. But my confidence level, I would say, is probably somewhere in the middle. I think he can get enough done. And he's been around for a minute. This isn't a new guy. We're not trotting Jack Nelson out there. And no, if I'm not picking on Jack Nelson, he's just young. And when you're that young as an offensive lineman, it doesn't really click for you that fast. It's a really freaking hard position to play, and people don't give it enough credit. And it's not something that just happens for you overnight, being an offensive lineman in the NFL. Matthew Bergeron, if you remember, had taken a minute. Now, granted, they had moved him around from where he played in college to where he's playing in the NFL, but it just takes a minute. So Elijah Wilkinson, I think, will be fine. And if he's not, I don't know what to tell you. Dwayne Ledford, I have a lot of confidence in the way that he runs his offensive line room, the way that these guys are conditioned, and the way that they operate. I think they're going to be fine. And he even said, these guys, the veterans, have rallied big time around trying to get Elijah specifically ready to go week one. I mean, to look over and see Chris Lindstrom, it's all good, man. He's going to do the most he can to get him ready to go as best he can.
Yeah. When it comes to Jack Nelson, like that transition from college to pros, particularly for offensive linemen, is huge because, the best pass rusher you faced in college probably last year is a backup in the NFL. Like maybe a third string guy coming into the league, and it's like, hey, you got to deal with Max Crosby and some of these other guys.
It's a big adjustment. That I think you make a really good point that not a lot of people talk about enough. Offensive line, that gap. We're not talking, which quarterback is another thing too. We're not talking about receiver. We're not talking about corner. These guys can figure it out if they're rookie safety, because we have a rookie safety starting, whatever, nickel, whatever you want to throw out there. Offensive line is such a big jump from college to the NFL. And so again, poor Jack Nelson, if he ever listens to this, he's like, gosh, they think I suck. I don't think that. I just really think that it's going to take a minute for Jack to get stuff to come together.
Yeah, I said the same thing. Watching his college film, I'm like, there is going to be a transition for him. It's going to be problematic, and you just hope he shows enough flashes, I think, that you make you go, okay, if this does click eventually for him, which is not going to be year one, but maybe it's year two, maybe it's year three, you might have something. And I think he showed enough of that this summer that, it is worthwhile that this bet may pay off in the future. But, we're talking about offensive linemen making that transition. Well, part of it is because you have these dominant pass rushers, and one of these dominant pass rushers just changed teams. And I want to talk about it because I didn't get a chance to talk about it yesterday with somebody. So we're going to unpack the whole Micah Parsons trade in Green Bay, what it means for the Falcons, what it means for the NFC landscape, with Maria Martin to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that's going to let you turn your football predictions into real rewards. College football's heating up. NFL season's not far behind, and PrizePicks is going to make it easy for you to get in on the game. Check out their max discounts for college football and the NFL, including week one. Dak Prescott just has to hit more on 0.5 passing yards, and that's what makes PrizePicks so easy to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you take the Dak Prescott one, right, that's one easy pick. Just add one more. Maybe Michael Penix's stat projections are more or less. And if you get them right, you cash in and multiply your money. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. So Maria, the funny thing is, I didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday because me and Jarvis were recording at the exact time it was happening. So we weren't on our phones or nothing. We were just chopping it up, talking about Deidre Sanat and other things that I wound up cutting out of.
Oh, so it happened literally when you guys were talking?
Yeah. And so after we record, I have to do a Locked On Zoom meeting for some upcoming thing that we're working on. And the people are like joking, like, oh, we don't have full attendance here because Locked On Packers and Locked On Cowboys are pretty busy with other stuff. I'm like, what are they talking about? So I'm just on this Zoom meeting, looking at my phone, seeing what happened with the Micah Parsons trade. I'm like, what? And I'm like trying to keep it together because I just my brain is like, what the heck is going on? And while staying locked in on what these people are talking about in the Zoom meeting. And so it was a whole challenge, but I just need to unpack some thoughts on this. I can't believe that, this actually happened for what he went for. And now to me, this now puts Green Bay potentially in the driver's seat to be, the top team in the NFC just because they already were like one of the better defenses in the NFL. And then you add like a 15 sack guy on top. Whoa, what a incredible achievement that Green Bay was able to pull off here.
Seriously, and quietly too.
Yes. So Maria, as I still process this, clearly you can tell me I haven't processed this fully. I will let you talk about it. What are your thoughts on this Micah Parsons trade? What does this mean for everything as I continue to process
this has such big ramifications on the future of how we view trades, if I'm being honest, and also the shakeup that it does, not only just in the NFC, but divisionally, is absolutely insane. Like lunatic is the way that I can describe it. And it's funny because I was sitting at my desk yesterday getting ready to go on TV, and I didn't even read Green Bay. I just see Cowboys agree to trade Micah Parsons coming down on my phone. So I just see trade. And I'm like, what? I'm scrolling as much as I can. I see the numbers. I see where he's going. And we always knew Green Bay was definitely in win now mode. This is the clearest indicator on the planet. You pay somebody the amount of money that Micah got. It's insane. And honestly, if I was ever a hold-in at my job, they would just be like, okay, see you later. But he was a hold-in and gets $188 million. That's insane to me. I know that everyone in the NFC North now is sweating bullets. They're like, wait a second, I had a chance. I mean, the Lions, they're like, what? Why? Don't come here. What is going on? I don't like this. But wow, I mean, I don't even have enough words to describe the shock and just how impressed I am by Green Bay in general. And this is so uncharacteristic of Jerry Jones to do anything the way that this unfolded and unraveled. And now you have an entire Cowboys team who is pissed off, like completely pissed off that this happened. But this is the most the NFL is a business indicator I've ever seen in my life. I just think it changes so many things, particularly in the NFC and definitely the NFC North. My goodness, Vikings, them too. They're probably like, wait a second, I thought we were getting some stuff together. What happened? And then Micah Parsons blows all that up. Good for Micah. I'm super happy for him that it worked out the way that it did. Glad that it didn't have as much of a direct effect on the Falcons. Now it does just because of the NFC, but sorry to the Falcons fans who believe that this was ever a possibility, because I'm sorry, that was never going to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I did a whole episode about the hypothetical Micah Parsons trade, but part of that was like, there's no way that the Cowboys are going to trade Micah Parsons at this stage.
No,
in the
I didn't think they would.
It's just like, if you were going to trade him, the time to do that was in March, where in theory, you could have traded him to Green Bay then, and you could have got James Pierce, the incredible James Pierce, to help replace him. But now you got to wait till 2026. But like, I don't know. It's pretty wild to me. Like, let's talk about the Falcons aspect for the folks out there.
Yeah.
That are like, why couldn't the Falcons pull this off? In your words, Maria, why couldn't the Falcons pull this off?
Well, number one, it was going to cost you way too much that the Falcons just simply don't have. And not only monetary assets, but they don't have the draft capital anymore. because of the point, exactly what you just said, the point in the year in which this happened. That to me was the most mind-boggling thing of the entire thing. The money I knew was always going to be some astronomical number. You don't hold in, and you're not Micah Parsons if you're not going to get paid an exorbitant amount of money. But I don't understand why it took this long. This could have looked so different in the spring. And this was probably one of the more dramatic ones that I can remember. It's been years in the NFL that we've seen a trade to this magnitude, obviously, but the Falcons do not have that draft capital anymore. You just mentioned James Pierce Jr. They had to give up assets to go get him in the first round. So it was never going to be a possibility. Number one, Kirk completely decimated that with the type of monetary issues that they have tied to his contract. And there was room monetarily for the Falcons at the time. If you really wanted to go all in for a player, the Falcons would have had to give up a lot more, I think, than what the Cowboys did, especially given the time of the year that they did it. And I don't think the Falcons were really willing to do that. And in turn, they got a bunch of cheap players, meaning from the draft. That is cheap comparatively to Micah Parsons. You're building through the draft in that way. We see that tenfold with all the rookies we just displayed over the last half hour that are potentially starting on your team. They went that route versus a win now, one player to fix your whole team. And that would have been such a gamble because remember, technically, the Falcons have already done that with Kirk Cousins. They thought that he was the missing piece and he was the expensive player. He was the one person on one side of the ball. Clearly, we're talking about two different sides of the ball, but he's the guy that you brought in to save your team. That didn't happen. In case you guys are living under a rock, it's not the quarterback anymore. And so I don't ever think that Arthur Blank is that big of a gambler. And to me, it just never felt like a reality.
Yeah. For me, when I think about the timeline where this could have happened, I think it was a possibility at the beginning of the offseason if the Cowboys had been shopping Micah Parsons then, but then the challenge would have been been a bidding war at that point in time, which is part of the reason why the Cowboys wait this long. Like you could have gotten a much bigger haul if you had been actively shopping him at a time when everybody would have been all in on Micah Parsons. But it would have been more feasible, I think, in March for the Falcons to maybe make a trade for Micah Parsons. But even then, I would have, I'm always skeptical of everything. But
you don't say. No, you're pretty positive. At least when I'm around, you're pretty positive.
All
right, go ahead. Get your skepticism out.
Yeah, I know. But like, I would have been skeptical whether the Falcons would have won a bidding war at that point in time. But
to be fair, Aaron, when have they done that? And that's not you being skeptical. I don't know. I mean, they're not a team that really makes slam dunk trades like that. And to be fair, when I thought Micah Parsons to the Falcons, I couldn't think of an example that would give me hope that something of this magnitude could come through for this team.
Yeah. So we will see what Micah Parsons does in Green Bay.
He's going to tear it up.
Yeah.
Good luck to the NFC North.
Yes. Good luck to the Falcons making the playoffs and then having to deal with the Green Bay Packers at some point.
That's honestly the biggest thing that sucks for the Falcons. Again, like not a direct impact because it's not your division or anything like that. But if you're talking about down the line, dang it.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking.
Norton versus Micah Parsons is not a thing I'm looking forward to in January.
Oh, man.
No offense, but it's like,
Micah Parsons versus anyone, dude. He's so good, and it's why this played out the way it did, and I hate that so many like little Easter eggs gave Falcons fans hope. He's walking in the tunnel, he's eating his nachos, and someone's like, "Come to the Falcons," and he does this. I'm like, man, he's playing with y'all. That's
the closest. We'll always have the nachos in the tunnel moment where Micah Parsons was this close to being. That's it.
Oh man, as soon as that happened, I thought, oh, he's just gonna give all these people hope. Man, dang it. Put the phone down, Micah. It's not gonna happen. I mean, look, he's gonna go anywhere that pays him what he got. Who cares?
Yeah.
I just knew it wasn't gonna be the Falcons. Unfortunately, heck, that would have been great. I would have loved to have him here.
Well, I'll just say to all the Falcon fans, the next time you eat nachos and you get in your feelings, I will understand,
100%.
Yes.
If you write off nachos the rest of your life, you get it.
just gonna be sad nachos for the rest of your life.
Man.
Oh man. But thank you, Maria, for coming on and commiserating with me on this whole Micah Parsons situation, talking about the Falcons roster. Look forward to many more frequent chats with you this upcoming season when we actually can talk about real football as opposed to practice, as opposed to the preseason, all that stuff. We get real football. We're just little more than a week away from that. And of course, that is going to be what we'll be covering for the next 4 to 5 months here on Locked On Falcons. So continue to make us your first listen by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, you can check out Maria Martin's stuff on 11 Alive Sports Extra, midnight, Sundays. Catch him. You'll see Jarvis. You'll see Tanitra. You'll see so many folks that you know and love from the Locked On Podcast Network. One day I will be on Sports Extra, but
we've already thought about it. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So one day we will get there, but that's where you can find Maria's stuff. Go check out lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Give us your feedback on that. And of course, go check out the Locked On College Football Kickoff coming at you every week with the content that only Locked On can provide. It is all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.